Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be talking a little bit more about shifting your thinking patterns in positive ways, challenging the conditioned thoughts that you have in order to open up the possibilities for you. I'm going to start with explaining the basics of CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. Most people have heard of cognitive behavioral therapy on some level. Basically, it is the concept that it is not a situation that makes us behave and feel the way we do. It is our thoughts about the situation. Our thoughts impact our behavior, which then in turn can impact our external environment and circle back to the beginning. And then that external environment and the situation impacts our thinking, impacts our feelings and behavior, and so on and so forth. So sometimes we get stuck in these cycles and we struggle to get out of them. That is why we need to challenge our thoughts. Now, the tricky thing is, our thinking patterns are conditioned from a young age. We are sent all of these subtle messages, whether that be from our peers, our parents, our surroundings, teachers, any message that we're sent, we start to then process and internalize and can impact our thinking. So, for example, if growing up you heard a lot of feedback in school, such as, oh, you're just not good at math, you're going to take in that information. That information is going to trigger a thought for you. Now, you could think, oh, I am not good at math. That's what they said. I must be stupid. Then that thought of I must be stupid is going to impact how you feel. You're going to feel insecure and like you're not good enough. And then, again, your behavior will shift. You're not going to try as much. You're going to think, what's the point? Why even bother? And then, in turn, you're going to get a bad grade, you're going to get the similar feedback, and that cycle continues. Now, same situation, somebody says you're bad at math, you could instead think, oh, I would have to work hard in order to get better so that I can succeed. If you think that way, then you are going to approach things differently. You might feel motivated and determined, even pissed off and ready to prove people wrong. Hey, I will take that motivation. And then, in turn, you might be more successful, and then that cycle is going to shift. You are challenging that cycle that you could easily get stuck in. Where does this conditioning come from? How do we determine which direction we go, which thinking pattern we fall into? A lot of it has to do with consistency. The more we hear negative messages about ourselves, about the world, about others, the more likely it is that our default is negative thinking. And then we get more likely to get stuck in this cycle. Whereas if we're hearing a lot of positive feedback surrounding us, if we, in turn, surround ourselves with that positive energy, we're more likely to think in the positive, and that's going to help us break the negative cycles and challenge them instead of accepting everything people say that is negative as true. But this is a really challenging thing. A lot of times where I see people getting stuck in this cycle is related to work. They'll be like, I just really need to be motivated at work. I got to shift my mindset, all gung-ho and ready to go into it with a positive attitude. And then they get there and their coworkers are all complaining and dreading Mondays and rolling their eyes about the meetings they have and gossiping about all their coworkers. And they get sucked into this. Even though they had the best intention to carry this positive energy into their workday, so easily they're surrounded by these negative thoughts, and then that throws off their plan. It's really hard to break free of those messages that we're surrounded by. A lot of times this happens with family. If somebody's family of origin is in general has a negative mindset, then that will in turn impact their ability to challenge it and see positively. It takes a lot more effort. The way to shift out of this can be challenging the rules that we create for ourselves, because ultimately that's what it comes down to. These thoughts or these statements we hear about ourselves, they become rules. Like, I'm not good at math, that becomes the rule. I'm not good at math. And then we don't challenge it, we don't break it. And on a smaller scale, something like, oh, I always do this in this order. I always do my laundry on Sundays. Even these rules can then create patterns that impact us. Like, okay, well, what if one Sunday you're busy, you can't do your laundry, then your laundry sits for a week, and then you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed. Like, this rule does not exist for any reason, and yet we feel so stuck on it because that is the rule that it can impact our life negatively. This is why a lot of times too, things like New Year's resolutions go south, is because it's all or nothing. We think, oh, I've got to be fully committed to my goals. I'm going to do all the things at once. And then the new year comes, we start, we're feeling good and motivated. And then a couple days in, our work has donuts in the office. And then we're like, well, I'll just have one. Then it's, well, I let go of my diet. I didn't follow my plan. The whole thing is out the window. And because we're all or nothing, now we're nothing. It's like, well, I broke my rule already, so I'm just gonna go back to the unhealthy patterns, sometimes even more so than we were before. When actually, if we just allow ourselves space to break the rules a little bit without it impacting the overall big picture of who we are and our patterns, then we have a more balanced and healthy life. It's really important to challenge these things. If we stick to the rules that we set for ourselves, then we're only going to be continuing the same cycles and we can't get better. I'm sure you may have heard the statement, we cannot grow in our comfort zones, and that is so true. It is comfortable for a reason. It's what we know. Sometimes we're more comfortable with negative mindsets. We're more comfortable with chaos because it's what we're used to. And unless we challenge that comfort zone, things aren't going to change. We won't be better. And if you're okay with where you're at, then that's totally cool. But most of us have things that we feel we could improve. We're motivated to try to improve. And yet we still are holding on too tightly to our comfort zones. So, how can we start to challenge this? It can be scary. I've had clients tell me, I'm not going to do this. My rules exist for a reason, and it is too overwhelming and scary for me to even think about challenging these bigger rules that I know don't help me, but it's all I know. Okay, fine. I'm not telling you to start with the big things. In fact, I think you should start with the smaller things, the things that have no consequences and you can easily see don't. Good example of this is breakfast for dinner. Most of us have tried that at one point in time. But what I notice with breakfast for dinner is that it tastes a little bit different. When I eat the same types of foods, eggs, bacon, toast, waffles, if I eat that at night, it feels different than in the morning. It feels more special. It feels like more fulfilling in some ways. I enjoy it more. Why is that? Because we're breaking this rule. It feels unique, even though in reality it doesn't do anything different. It's the same exact foods. So that's an easy way to start challenging these rules you have for yourself. Another example that came up with my husband, it's funny because when it's Christmas time, we always talk about which cookies to make. I ask him, any special requests for Christmas cookies? And one time he said chocolate chip. And I was like, no, chocolate chip cookies aren't Christmas cookies. Those are just everyday cookies. Like, you could have those any time of year. Christmas cookies are cookies you only have in December. Now, does that make any sense? No. Why can't I make these Christmas cookies other time of year? It's just a silly rule. There are no consequences to me making Christmas cookies that I associate with Christmas outside of December, just like there's nothing wrong with making chocolate chip cookies around Christmas time. So that can be a fun way to challenge this too. Those traditions, or there's those things we associate with special occasion, turkey, ham, like these bigger things we associate with holidays, just being like, I'm going to make these foods outside of the traditional time of year that I associate them with. These little things, as simple and silly as some of it might seem, they are going to start the process of retraining your brain. And it has more impact than we realize. Once we start to realize, oh, these rules don't need to be rules, they don't make a difference, we're going to be able to challenge those deeper, more impactful rules a bit more. Once you are ready to take that step beyond these simple challenges to a more deeper behavior that's been conditioned, I encourage people to take these steps in questioning the thoughts that contribute to the behaviors. So the first thing is we have to identify the behavior and the thought that contributes. So let's say, for example, that you're dating and you have this rule that you've set for yourself that you cannot text first. You need to wait for this person you're interested in to text you, and that's your rule. We have to first question, what thought contributes to that? Maybe the thought is, I will seem too eager. I will look like I care too much. They might feel overwhelmed if I text them. Or I don't want to embarrass myself because it would be bad if they knew I liked them. Those thoughts might then lead you to feel insecure or nervous or uncertain where you stand, and then your behavior follows suit. You're not going to reach out first, and that could really impact the connection. They might not be thinking about it the same way and think you're not interested because you're not texting them. So we identified the thoughts that contribute to the behavior. Next, I want you to just ask, what is the evidence that supports that this thought is true? Okay, what evidence supports the thought that they're going to think you're too eager or that you care too much? Usually, there's not going to be a lot of evidence. Maybe there are specific things that they've said or behaviors you've seen that can be evidence, but a lot of the times there isn't much. Then ask yourself the evidence against that thought. Well, the evidence is we scheduled another date. They said they were excited to see me again. The evidence is that when I do text first, they respond. We can find more evidence usually that are against the thought that is distorted. Then the next question is, what is the worst thing that could happen? So, what is the worst thing that could happen if you text first? They are annoyed. They're like, oh, wow, this person is crazy. Like, oh, they care too much. And they step back. Okay, if that is the worst outcome, could you survive that? Is that something you feel like you could handle? Sure, maybe it'd be uncomfortable and it'd feel embarrassing for a while. But for most people, hey, that's something we could overcome. Now, ask yourself, what is the best possible outcome? Best possible outcome is they're excited to hear from you. Maybe they take that step of initiative you've shown as a positive thing and it makes them even more attracted and drawn to you. Maybe it sparks a positive conversation that allows you to get closer and connect more. And maybe it provides validation that they do like you. They respond in a way that is validating for you as well and builds that connection. Last question is, what is most likely? Now, of these two outcomes, most of the time it's going to be somewhere in the middle. Maybe it's not the best possible outcome, but it's usually not the worst possible outcome either. Maybe they respond, you have a nice conversation, and it feels nice. Maybe it's not a super validating thing, but, there's something positive that comes from it. Then look at those things and determine what you feel is best for how you proceed. So, to review, first step, identify the distorted thought that's contributing to the situation. Next, explore the evidence that supports that thought and the evidence against that thought. Then, look at and identify the worst possible outcome. Let your brain go there. Finally, look at the best possible outcome. And from all of these answers, determine what is most likely. And let that guide your behavior moving forward. These are some ways to start retraining your brain. I think for a lot of people, what I notice is just even that first step of identifying the distorted thought can be a challenge. Sometimes we're not even aware of the thought. We just feel so overwhelmed. I'll ask people, okay, what thoughts are contributing to your feeling this way? And they just continue to reiterate and explain the situation to me. And I'll have to pause them and say, no, that's the situation. What are your thoughts about the situation that is leading to this feeling for you? Sometimes people even struggle to identify the feeling attached to the situation and the thoughts about it. So even just going through that process as a start, if that's something you're struggling with, of being like, this is the situation, these are my thoughts, this is how it makes me feel. Even just starting there can be really empowering and a great step. I hope that you guys find this helpful. I know that it can be complicated when you're first starting to challenge these conditioned thoughts and behaviors, but it really, for me as a therapist, I feel is the basis of most, if not all, therapy. Most therapists refer to this in some way. I think it is so important to challenge our thinking patterns and recognize why they're conditioned, how they impact us, and then also ultimately taking control back. Our minds are so powerful. If you can gain control of your thoughts, you are more likely to be able to make those positive changes for yourself. Comment down below if there's any questions that come up or if there are any other topics you'd be interested in hearing more about. And I appreciate your time. Hopefully I will see you on the next video. Bye.